It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello, friends. I am Rob, and this is my State of the Dungeon address, the accounting of the various deeds and misdeeds of my players as they pass through the adventure The Foulest of Spirits, the second chapter in Gooey Cube's Red Star Rising campaign. This particular episode took place on the 17th of February. This was the second session of The Foulest of Spirits. Prior, the group had been tasked by Borag, the Bravda of the Blue Veil troop, basically the dad of the troop, to go and run an important errand for the troop while he, his wife Kalnase, and Cray the Blade went out on a very important mission for the Hanatas. The troop was basically to stay at their encampment for a time until everybody could get back together again, but the party was being sent off on one mission and they were going to go off on another. So, of course, at this time as well, Haranan had come back to consciousness, but at the same time, Mother Sylvenza and Vezi were still either comatose or unconscious still. So the group were basically saddled to follow a map, to go along a trail through darkened woods on Darktide, to go and deliver a few scrolls. The Hanatas method of communicating with each other is to place these scrolls in a space on a willow tree. It's ensorcelled. The only way to get to the tree or to get at the messages was to possess the Bonduran ring of the Bravda, which they were entrusted with. Borag gave it to Ventov. And they were to go and take these two scrolls and put them into a hollow in the tree and take anything with a blue veiled troop symbol and bring it back with them. So, this is obviously going to involve some sort of magic inherent in the Hanatas. And the group is being entrusted, though they are yet young, with this important task. So, this begins what we call the Walk Through the Woods of Hell, as they've called it, because let's just say it's pretty action-packed. This is, of course, on Darktide, the most ill-omened day of the year. It's kind of in the remembrance of when the creator, Avova, died fighting off the Lords of Corruption, sacrificing his existence to seal them away. So it's a bad time, and it is every year. But this year, it's really bad. The group finds no shortage of things to run across. First of all, they had a few minor encounters, eventually capping off where we pick up the adventure with them facing a group of skeletons. And for this session, we had a full group, which was nice. So they recovered after fighting the skeletons. Of course, there wasn't a great deal of loot. They were just skeleton raiders moving around through the woods. So the group continued down the path. That is really, at the expense of making it sound rather railroady, it's kind of is. They have to go down this path. That's what they were told to do. So they did. And as they were going along, I had figured that with everybody back together again, it was time to pull out a little not-so-random encounter, just to kind of get them jogged up and ready for something that could give them a little bit of a fight. So, they found a deer carcass in the woods, which led them to find the thing that killed the deer, which were a pair of green stripe panthers. These, if you've seen Cringer from Masters of the Universe, they kind of look a lot like that. And these kitties came out, and they thought the group was messing with their kill, so they pounced. The fight was really one-sided. They didn't do a great deal of damage, and their pounces were underwhelming. The group had a fair amount of luck. I wasn't so lucky. And when they turned Steel and Spell against the Panthers, the panther, one of the panthers went down relatively quickly. And being beasts, they didn't want to fight to the death, so when its mate was taken down, the female turned and ran. And that was the end of that fight. Relatively simple. They hid the carcass, which still good meat, and the dead tiger, or panther, because its pelt could be very valuable, and they weren't very far away from the caravan yet, so they hung them and propped them up behind a tree, keeping them out of sight. Hopefully they'll be all right. So when they come back, they can take those back to the camp. Well, there was nothing left to do but press on. That's kind of the modus operandi. And as they were going along, they eventually saw a large flight of very large, what looked like crows. But they weren't crows. They were carrion ravens. A nasty bird, but generally not particularly dangerous. Nothing that usually will attack humans, and not a group of humans, certainly, unless they're in fairly large numbers. And they rarely get together in very large numbers. In this case, 12 is enough for them to start attacking. We saw some of the things that will kind of become a constant feature in this session. We had some people who were really, really lucky. Haranen was rolling very well, very high initiatives, decent attack rolls. Glenn was doing all right, except he can't seem to hit when he's aiming at beasts for some reason. He's a ranger who can't hunt. But everyone else, oof. There was some pretty gruesome dice rolling. Lots of ones popped up. Now, I don't always make ones be some catastrophic failure or something. I don't make weapons snap too often. I don't have a lot of bad things happen, but players were just not rolling so well throughout the night. And the party dispatched a number of these ravens, and that was enough for the flock to turn and fly away. Basically, it really didn't... I think Crendon got slashed on the cheek by one of the birds. They really couldn't do a great deal. And Ventov is just standing there blocking birds. His abilities and his defensive powers to protect others really has made a difference in the group's effectiveness so far. Being able to impose this advantage is a huge benefit to a group. So, after they put paid to the birds relatively quickly, of course, there's really not much loot. They do a little bit of looking around, and they occasionally find a few coins here and there, but nothing of particular value at this point. They continued along. And the next thing that they came to was the old cottage, which was drawn in the map. The cottage looks a little sinister, honestly. It's obviously kind of gone to pot. And, out here in the middle of ill-aspected woods, yeah, they were curious, but they know what curiosity does to cats, and they didn't want to think that adventurers would fare that much better. So they just observed until they noticed that there were a group of zombies that came around. Not zombies, technically, they're wretched walkers, but potato. They came charging at them. Of course, all of these, with excellent illustrations. These walkers came up, and tactically, it was interesting, Ventov charged into their midst, attacked one, and if you've ever seen zombies and how they fight, they're going after the closest creature. So Ventov basically offered himself as their target to spare everybody else. He has the best armor class, so to a certain extent that makes sense. But he got hammered. A critical bite and another bite meant that he had to run the risk, a relatively small risk, he is a dwarf, of contracting contagion. He did not. So he was really just badly wounded from the assault. The group, however, attacked with a gusto, and these walkers, while they're offensively pretty tough, they can slam with their limbs and they bite very effectively. All in all, they couldn't take the kind of beating that the group administered to them. And one by one, they eventually dropped. The group used tactics to kind of fan around, shoot into their ranks, and then move up and try to slice some off of Ventov so that he didn't die, because that would be bad. And they did manage to save him. The rain of attacks, everybody using their specialty, Haran moving in with his sword, and Glyn firing with his bow and being very effective that way. Brandel brandishing magic missiles and fire bolts to spray damage around at the creatures. Again, proving quite effective. And I believe she actually finished several off with a burning hand. Just they didn't like that very much at all. Vanessa seems to be enjoying using her produce fire because she gets to attack using her wisdom modifier, which is very good. So she's flinging little balls of flame at her foes. And we saw Crendon was mostly sitting back and using his vicious mockery, which it's a psychic attack, so it will affect even zombies who would be mindlessly normally immune to jibes and japes. Still works just fine. And Ventov, of course, fighting with his axe and kicking all kinds of butt. Eventually, the walkers couldn't stand the party and went down. The group thought that was a pretty bad omen for what might be in the cottage, and they decided to put the cottage behind them. They left without investigating. Maybe they'll come back to it. Who knows? It's a possibility. But moving onward, they continued along, and at the southern end of the clearing, the path continued as they knew it would, and eventually revealed a ghostly image that walked across the path that only Glyn could see. And Glyn was just kind of, okay, I see this woman. She looks incredibly sad. The rest of the group's, okay, well, what can we do? And realistically, there wasn't anything they could do but follow Glyn, who was interested in seeing, what became of her. So they went and followed the spirit through the forest, using Glyn's sensitivity to these ghosts, since he's already had several supernatural occurrences. And he found a glade, and she was walking around looking. They used their excellent skills in survival and detection, and they found an unofficial grave, a repository of bones, which they respectfully made a little beer for, and burning, pyre, and burned the bones with ceremony, and that let her pass on. Let them feel really good about themselves, which was kind of nice. And GUI rewards were had by both Glyn and I think Crendon got one too. So then the group was walking around. They saw a strange sight. They saw a sky ship basically underhang a ship, possibly waterworthy, underneath a large bag of lighter-than-air gas. And they saw it, and they saw a body get pitched off of it. Whether or not that person was alive when they flew off or not is anybody's guess, but they eventually tracked the body down and found out that this person was dead. They're a Sarth, a male Sarth, who are exotic enough. They are tall. They have orange skin and purple hair and eyes. They are some of the people who cannot do magic. They are cut off from the flow of magic. As a result, though, some of them can actually use the crystallized magic within flow stones without suffering painful death as most other creatures would. So the Sarth died from the fall, apparently. A lot of blood all over. All he had were his silk jacket, his silk pants, and he had a flyer for a tavern in Darkenhaven. Strongarm McGilly's. also had a couple of notes annotated, several of them crossed off. Maybe a lead for something? Who knows? But the final name was there. None of them had any idea of the significance. And they continued on, because what else? Although they buried the body after relieving the body of the clothes, because I think Crendon liked the clothes. Big old hammer pants and a nice vest. So, continuing along, they ended up finding a old man. This was after they saw something looking at them in the darkness. Well, it's not dark. I should say they saw them looking at them from the dark of the underbrush in the area. And then this old man comes walking across the path. He sees them. He's all scratched up. His clothes are dirty and bloodied. And he begs them for help. They move up to check, but at the same time, they're wary and suspicious, which is probably a good thing, because the old man taunted them and he transformed into a half-human, half-wolverine, called a werverine. Nasty creatures. They look like this. And the werverine had two friends come out, and the fight began. Werverines, they found out, are lycanthropes. They have a difficult time passing on their curse. As a matter of fact, it's practically impossible for them to actually kill, or actually impossible for them to pass on their curse to anybody except someone who is highly experienced. And none of the players probably could have survived enough bites to get cursed. So, it was just a straight-up fight. Now, werverines, of course, are resistant to any kind of damage except for silver, but also serric iron weapons. Happily, many people in the group have either magic to rely on, serric iron weapons, or a magical weapon. Ventov has his battle axe. Well, the serric iron wakizashi that Crendon is running around with is a weapon he can use. The only one who didn't have his preferred weapon be serric iron was Glyn, but Glyn does have a serric iron short sword, so he was capable of defending himself. Of course, there's a serric iron longsword for Haranen, and both Brandel and Vanessa have access to magic, so everybody could fight in this one. And while most of the group went charging after the one that tried to lure them in the center of the path, for some reason Glyn got a wild hair up his nethers and ran straight at the two that were in the woods ready to ambush. Stabbed one, but now he's facing on two by himself, and he doesn't exactly have the best armor of the lot, so it was kind of a strange move for the ranger to do this. And the werverines made him pay. They turned around and savaged him. Didn't drop him. My dice weren't great, but he got bitten and he got clawed. So he was not feeling very good after that. The group rallied, but again, we saw some people roll really bad with rolling ones, and we saw some people land, clutch criticals at great times. It was all up and down all night long. So they did eventually beat the werverines, and that was pretty much where we ended it. But there's one other encounter that I've been kind of reserving because it's the fun one. After they got done at the old cottage and moved on, they did see this large pond. It was lightly iced over because it's cold. It is the very beginning of winter. So in the center of this pond, there was a beaver dam. Now, beavers make big dams, domes of sticks and mud, and that's where they live, and they have water holes they can get out and air holes and such. They also had a dam, which basically helped to make the pond itself. The group was looking at that, like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But Brandel saw that there was a very straight stick with a bit of a crystal at one end of it in the middle of the dam, just sticking out. She was like, that looks like a staff, possibly magical. We could use that. So they did some investigating. The ice was way too thin for any of them, even their lightest, to cross it. So what they did was Haranen gave her his ring of jumping to jump from the bank to the lodge, or the dam, the lodge. And she could grab the stick, bounce back. So they did that. And they found out that these weren't normal beavers, because Ziathe, right? Walk, hike through the woods of hell. Yeah. These were hard-spine beavers. They're a cross between beavers and the idea of the kind of the mythology behind porcupines. You know, some people think that porcupines can shoot their quills. They can't. It's impossible for them to do that. But those quills can get dislodged if they hook into somebody. They're designed to do that. Well, these things can actually whip their tail around and fire spines, kind of like a manticore. They're a bit bigger than normal beavers, and they have a nasty disposition. So, two of them came out of the lodge to deal with Brandel when she crashed down on top of their lodge. One was actually watching her from under the water and was coming up before she jumped, so all of a sudden this one jumps out and Ventov happened to be nearby. So, everything began. First of all, Brandel, of course, is a wizard. She had a mage armor spell up that she had cast earlier, but she's being attacked by two foes. She doesn't usually like being attacked by foes, and one of them did manage to get a raking shot in on her leg, which left a spine stuck in her leg. However, this one combat ninja monk beaver was missed by Ventov. With his magic axe, couldn't hit it. The things had a 12 armor class. They could not hit this. The thing that I was just waiting for it to finish off, of course, was Glyn. Glyn standing 10 feet away. Got his longbow. It's 10 feet away. Thwack! Hits the ground. Just so sad. So sad. Haranen comes up. Oh, miss. Can't hit it. Oh, so it's bad. It's so bad. They have the toughest time defeating this. But when they do, it only takes one blow. And I think, actually, I believe it was Vanessa who just one-shotted it with a dagger. Just dead. Because she's got good dexterity. She rolled maximum damage, which is enough to kill this beaver. They're not really tough. So then the group's like, oh, okay, we could do this. Then comes the folly. Crendon's player says, this is probably going to be crazy, but I'm going to run, jump off onto the bank, and jump over to the lodge to help Brandel. He rolls a 1. So he instead runs, loses his footing in the mud on the bank, slips, and he slides under the ice, breaking through, sliding into the frigid water. This will probably be hilarious, but it's nothing too dangerous, right? Right. So, the mud, he kicks up mud and everything, but he's not in any immediate danger because the adult beavers are still attacking Brandel. This is when the group starts actually finding out how to use their combat dice. Brandel does zap 1, but then that's when Glyn gets a great shot, puts it through the head of one of the beavers. I believe Ventov fired a shot and finished off the other, so the beavers were accounted for. But Glyn's still under the ice. Crendon decides he is going to help his troopmate. No, sorry, take that back. Crendon's under the ice. Haranen decides he's going to go and help his troopmate. He rolls a 1. He slips, whoop, whoop, psh, drops his sword, looking for Crendon to try to pull him out. His Serric iron sword, yes. That was the last weapon he had in his hand, and that's what he dropped. His precious Serric iron longsword. So, So that goes into the water. At this point, Brandel's like, I'm just going to go over the ice and I'm going to help get Crendon out. Because Crendon is, his boot is being chewed on by a baby beaver. And that's when he tries, that's it. He first tries swimming towards the lodge. He doesn't. He gets lost and he doesn't roll well. And then he decides, I'm going to try to break through the ice because I don't want to be under this ice. And that's when he rolls a 1 again. He manages to get his hand up through a crack, but then he accidentally exhales and inhales some water and goes unconscious. 0 hit points. Nasty condition to be in. So, half of the group is now soaked and freezing, and now he's unconscious. The good news was, Brandel got to him quickly, fished him out, and made a medicine check to get the water out of his lungs. Haranen eventually gets up, and to his credit, he eschews looking for his sword. He goes over to help get Brandel and Crendon back to shore where they can get warmed up and dried off before going back and looking for his sword. They get him back, and Crendon gets warmed by some produced fire, produced by Vanessa, who can summon it up as a cantrip. So she's warming him up, and they do the first aid so that they wake him up. It takes a little bit. It's not instantaneous. They don't use magic for this. But they get him upright. And I basically treated the damage he took that reduced him instantly to 0 hit points as subdual damage. So this would be restored fairly quickly. But the group at this point, you know, I had one person almost killed. If he'd have been by himself, Crendon would have died in 2 feet of water. Stuck under this ice. That did the most damage, honestly, was the ice. The Werverines did not do, I don't think, as much damage as that bloody ice did to them. And eventually Brandel went back out into the water and helped Crendon to find his sword. So the group wasn't massively discomfited by this, and as a matter of fact, they did end up getting the staff, which turned out to be a staff of recovery, giving them access to a wonderfully warped source of Cure Light Wound spells. So that's nice. It'll probably pay off for them over the many sessions as they go. But it was definitely a cool time. And the group had a lot of fun, groaning at the horrible luck they had, and we all had fun laughing at each other's, occasional karmic difficulties. But in general, the group did pretty well, covering for each other. Again, good role play was had. Of course, we had some decent food. We had some snacks, and to keep on with the feel of the being of the Hanatas to our credit. Christy, who plays Brandel, brought along these wonderful, yummy snacks. They're French bread, and they had this great ricotta cheese spread over the top, and some hot honey, and they're very good. And we were very, very grateful for her for bringing those. I think everybody enjoyed that. As always, this group has so much fun in Xayathe, and I think they've really gotten the hang of these characters and know them quite well. And we'll get that tested as we continue to go along. So, anyhow, thank you very much for joining me. This has been another session of my State of the Dungeon. If you're enjoying this and you want to hear more of how their adventures play out, bear in mind, many of these adventures are out of order. No two people will probably run this adventure exactly the same way. So if it does seem like it's a little bit more linear, it can be easily changed up. It's a very fun adventure, well supported with handouts and things, so that the players really get a sense of where they're at and how much trouble they can be in. So, thanks again. If you enjoyed this, make sure you come back for more, like, subscribe, and all that. And I'll see you the next time for another State of the Dungeon Address. I'm Rob, and farewell.